All right. Thank you so much for joining us for our quarterly meeting of the Alliance of Lions Charitable Organizations. Lindy, would you like to get us started?
Sure, absolutely. So it's nice to see several of you again and appreciate the time to reconvene. It's hard to believe several months have passed since we last connected. And just wanted to thank you all again for responding to our survey that helped guide our content for our discussions. Today, the focus being on human resources, which no, I apologize. Today's board governance. I got ahead of myself. Okay. So next time is human resources. So sorry about that. But today being board governance, which will be grateful to have Daniel's insight from that. But I think just to be mindful of everyone's time and to get to the meat of the presentation, I think we could just jump into introductions of attendees to allow everyone a chance to introduce themselves, your name, your title, and the organization you represent. And thank you, Daniel, for putting together our agenda, and we can proceed into the new business after we do introductions. So I'm Lindy Lampkin, Executive Director of the Kentucky Lions Eye Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization based in Louisville, Kentucky, but serving the entire state of Kentucky with various vision-related programs and services. And happy to be here.
Awesome. And would you mind calling on somebody to
Sure.
do the next
Yes.
introduction?
Beth, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Beth Earhart. I'm the executive director of the Georgia Lions Lighthouse Foundation. And we do provide a variety of different ways to cover the state: teleoptometry, traditional clinics. We're the third state in the U.S. to get sight for kids. So that's kind of exciting through LCIF and Johnson and Johnson. So we're heavily focused on schools now and getting all of those students screened and seen, and surgery. We also do surgery.
Awesome. Thank you. ID Chris?
Oh, I'm unmuted. Hey, Beth. Sorry I didn't get the chance to talk to you this past weekend. Do you remember
Yes, sorry
me?
about that too. Yes.
Yeah, I was there. I was their keynote speaker. I called her out, but I never got a chance to go over there and visit the booth and
I
everything.
know. Whenever I was there, you had other people around you. So
Oh yeah, I was swamped. Actually, that's one of the notes that I'm trying to take and bring back to the board meeting next weekend is our board. Well, this weekend we're in Kansas. Next weekend we're at the board meeting. And one of the things as an idea is you're just too busy to do all of this other stuff, you know? And so I wanted to just thank Daniel and Lindy for taking the ball and running with this. Uh, this is a great opportunity for us to meet, but I think everybody knows me. Work for the Louisiana Lions Eye Foundation, and I'm just happy to be here. Thank you. Oh, I'm gonna call on Fruit over here. There.
I'm Lion Ron Fruit, Executive Director of the Lions of Illinois Foundation. We do a mix of eye and hearing programs, and we cover the entire state of Illinois. Let's see who's next. I guess Doug's the one I see. So Doug Thompson.
Great. Good morning. I am Doug Thompson. I'm the CEO of the Oregon Lions Sight and Hearing Foundation. We're based in a hospital facility here in Portland, and we serve people in need throughout Oregon. We partner with Lions clubs, largely but not entirely, to help people with surgery. We make eyeglasses out of our charitable optical lab. And in a meeting yesterday, I learned that we are on track to screen just over 190,000 Oregon children for vision health issues this year, which we're very proud of. Nice to be here. Let's see. Daniel, you're speaking, so you probably, I'm not sure who we haven't heard from. How about Marianne? Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I apologize. I was a couple minutes late. Yes, my name is Marianne Ragone. I'm the Director of Development and Communications at Altravision. We are Alliance Eye Bank located in Philadelphia. We service New Jersey, Delaware, and southeastern Pennsylvania. recovering corneas, and of course for cornea transplantation. So it's good to be here. Nice to see you all. Do I need to call on someone, or are we?
Sure, if you want the next person, otherwise I can. It just when
Okay.
it's in and out of mute, if you don't mind. So thank you.
How about
Okay.
PID Mel? I see Mel on our screen.
Yes, I am here. Get my volume up here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mel Bray, a Pest International Director. I'm the Executive Director for the Lions Eye Research Foundation of New Jersey, and I'm the immediate past president or past chairman of the Altravision Lions Eye Bank in Philadelphia with Marianne. So we kind of do a whole lot of things. In the Research Foundation, we do a lot of equipment purchases for Rutgers University Medical Department. In fact, we're working on another eye machine for them to get it done in next week and order them like a $7,000 unit. But we do a lot of that kind of thing, and we spend special referrals when the clubs and the charitable foundations can't do something for somebody, then our research foundation can step in at that point.
All right, and I think PCC Wesley Brown is the only other individual that has not been introduced yet.
Hello, my name is Wesley Brown Jr. I'm the president of the New Mexico Lions Eye Foundation, vice president of the New Mexico Lions Eye Bank, and I'm a member of the New Mexico Kids Site Foundation. And we're screening kids, we're doing cornea transplants and collecting corneas. Our eye bank is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we're buying our kids' site or our eyes. We're taking and buying we got a van, and we're going to make it where it can be mobile to go to different schools to get kids' eyeglasses fitted by an optician at the schools and do that the same day.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. And then, as Doug mentioned, I'm also the speaker for today, but I'm District Governor-elect Daniel Prohaska, President and CEO of Lions Vision Services in South Carolina. We're headquartered in Columbia, our state's capital, and we offer services in all 46 counties across our state for an array of eye care services, including screenings, exams, eyewear, eye surgeries, and vision technology. We also manage a collaborative group called the Palmetto Vision Alliance with other eye care entities, and we run a fishing tournament for the blind and visually impaired every year as well, and send the winners just up the road to North Carolina, to the Outer Banks, to compete in the international tournament. So I'm very excited to be able to share some information about board governance with you and our experience when we get a little bit later into the program. But before we get there, we have new business to attend to, and Lindy has graciously been the host for our survey, helping us to gather information from you all about what topics you want us to address and ways we can make our meetings more meaningful and helpful for you. The overall purpose of this alliance is to help you to be better equipped as leaders of Lions foundations around the country, so that we can better enable Lions clubs to serve communities. And I'd love for Lindy to share any additional updates or news from survey responses, as well as preferences for upcoming meeting topics.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. And so since we met on December 4th, and I've checked in and with the Survey Monkey that we were using. Unfortunately, whoever submitted a response, the only additional one we received was on December 5th, but it won't allow me to see that with the free version, but I didn't want to upgrade to the paid version just to see one survey response. So if you were the person who submitted that on December 5th, thank you for your input, but it won't let me see who it was, but it will provide those as part of the analytics with the free version. So still looking at kind of the summaries from the questions. The topic that was of most interest from survey respondents was still the development and fundraising, which we were grateful to have the insights during our December time together about development and fundraising. And then today, being focused on board governance, that was the tied with development and fundraising for the top subject of interest from respondents. So we're on track to check that off the list. And then after that, with the 10th survey response, that bumped up the professional development to the next ranked topic, and then followed by human resources, which I know we are on track to have our speaker on that as well. So perhaps the professional development topic would be one we want to dig into, but unfortunately, there was only one individual who was willing to speak on that. So I don't know if we might have other ideas for interest folks that you might know in your networks. We could certainly discuss that now if that's the topic we'd like to plug in after we get through our human resources. And then I know also on the agenda here talking about September content. So we could kind of factor that in for what programs and topics that are of interest to discuss. But at this point, not much difference in the survey responses from what was shared last time we convened. If we do want to, I could create the same survey, just a new link to allow for new responses. But like I said, we're capped out at the maximum number where we can really dig in to see who submitted the responses and the full analytics with our 10 responses that we have on the free version of SurveyMonkey that I use. So thoughts on professional development, or if there's another avenue, other topics that had higher responses after the few that have been mentioned were grant writing, program growth and execution, and strategic planning. Those were all tied with human resources, followed by legal and volunteer engagement and recruitment. Happy to answer any questions or what I can to drill into it more if you'd like on the SurveyMonkey side, but would like to open it to discussion or input on if we want to have professional development as our next focus area or any of the others that I mentioned. Anyone have thoughts on that?
Well, do we have a meeting before the September? Are we having another meeting before the September event? And that was supposed to be Mel. PID Mel was going to be doing something, right,
on June the 4th.
June
Yep.
4th.
PID Mail will be talking to us about HR.
Right. So one of the challenges that I'm having now, and I don't know if anybody can help out with or throw this, although I know it's very difficult to do this throughout the country, but hiring staff, hiring somebody at this point. I mean, if anybody's got any clues that could help me out over here. So we have that Site for Kids program that Beth was talking about, and I've been running this for a couple of years now. And I really need somebody to run it. I've hired 5 different employees. It's just not working. I can't wait to hear some more information about HR for small organizations like us, because I can't afford an HR officer type of thing just for 4 employees. But I'm really having the biggest challenge hiring either an administrative assistant, a mini me, and then also somebody to take my place in a few years. I've got 2.5 years left. I'm turning over the keys. So if you guys got any suggestions on hiring people or finding people, that'd be great. And the other thing that I would like to touch on, and just to kind of open the conversation, when we talk about going to September, and we get into the conversation, if you guys want to see if maybe I can get a speaker from Lions International, like from the legal department, to come talk to us about legal issues that we face, being, are we in compliance with LCI? Is there any questions that, is there any resources or help that we can get through them because we're part of a Lions organization, or either the LCIF grant questions? Just let me know and I can see what I can do. Thank you.
So I can talk a little bit about staffing if you want to get a quick answer on that. We had hired someone to run our school clinics. And unfortunately, after about a year, it didn't work out and we had to let her go. But it had a lot. Okay, so anyway, we're just hiring our next person. We advertise on Indeed, and I've talked with Indeed, and it seems that if we pay the little extra premium, we get a little bit better referrals on those people. This last time we had 5 people that looked good to me. And one of my staff members, I had 2 of us looking at the references or resumes. And we had 3 people show up. One canceled the day of, and then the other one just didn't show. And the very first person we interviewed was the one that we ended up hiring. We just felt he was just the right fit for us for that program. I don't know what you're looking for, Chris, exactly, but we're looking for someone who can be a manager, who can is good at working with employees and supervising them, and then good with working with the schools, has had experience in working with the schools. I think the first person that we had, one of the issues was that she had not been experienced in working with nonprofits. And so there's a little difference there than just school district experience. So that kind of changed it. But it also might be helpful, if you wanted to see, I'd be happy to share with you the job description that we use.
Yes, that'd be nice. So
Okay.
we'll make sure we get my email to you, Beth.
Okay.
There. So it's the lion@gmail. And thank you for Indeed. I'll have to look into that. Somebody did mention that, so I'll look into Indeed here. So thank you. Okay,
Sure.
Lion Daniel, I don't want to take up all your time, but I just wanted to answer that question.
Yep. One other suggestion that I'll throw out there for that is your local nonprofit association. There's a National Council of Nonprofits, and pretty much every state except for Wisconsin, Kansas, and Arkansas and Indiana have a local nonprofit association in their state. We lean pretty heavily on ours in South Carolina as a member of that association to help keep us up to date on trends and issues in the nonprofit sector. They have a statewide job board that we post jobs at, and we've gotten the last 2 of our hires from that job board posting. And it looks like the Louisiana Alliance for Nonprofits is the one in your neck of the woods, Chris. So I'd encourage you to check that out. It's been a great resource overall for our organization over the years.
Wow, thank you.
And that's a good point. We used that a lot when I was in Utah, but here they don't have like a job board for Georgia. And everything has to go through their national group. So it doesn't seem to work as well here.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. You may have helped me out of a situation.
Daniel, I was going to suggest the same. We have we have the Center for Nonprofit Excellence in Kentucky, as well as the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, who, like you mentioned, is one of the statewide that provides various resources and job postings. That's actually how I found the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, is how I found my job posting to be where I am today. So you never know about that. And the other suggestion I would make, and we can talk certainly more, and I'm sure PID Mel, when he presents, will echo this, but oftentimes to avoid some of what Beth mentioned with some of the just you're spinning your wheels a little bit with the different issues that arise with potential candidates, that personal referral or recommendation. And so putting it out to, your board members, and then asking them to think of who's in their network, right? Because I think they know who would be a good fit based on their knowledge of your organization and what you're looking for and what you aren't, probably. And so a lot of times, referrals and recommendations can come when you put it out there that you're looking for that from people you don't even realize, or they might not think of somebody until you kind of put that on their radar. So that might be something that you've already done, but definitely something that doesn't hurt to remind people, to know what you're looking for and what the opportunity is and who might be a good fit to help your organization, continue your impact with your mission. So
Perfect.
very
Thank
good.
you.
Absolutely. Are there any other inputs as it pertains to topics related to September. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of avenues that we could pursue. As with the other meetings, we would provide the opportunity for Zoom participation. Although we've discussed, the value of the in-person attendance, we want to extend the opportunity to folks who are unable for various reasons to travel. So September 17th, as part of the Atlantic City USA-Canada Lions Leadership Forum, being in person as well as the extension of a Zoom participation opportunity, would we want to focus a main session of similar setup as this one to being focused on professional development? That's a question to the group. I will say that the individual who shared willingness to present on that topic was also, again, PID Mel Bray. So we certainly could have him share insights on professional development unless someone else has another idea. But I'm curious and open it to the group for comments or input.
I'll kick in a little bit. I think Chris's idea of seeing if someone would present on LCIF grant writing, we use it extensively at the Lions of Illinois Foundation. I mean, pretty much as soon as we finish one, we're starting to plan for what our next one is. Now, that actually means that, we'll finish one, do the completion paperwork for one grant, and it'll probably take us 9 months to a year before we get the next one presented. But it is LCIF is a great resource that all of us can make good use of, and I can't overstress the value of having them as a partner in what you're doing.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think that, at least for me personally, our organization has had grant funding in the past, but not something in my time frame. And so it would be beneficial to me as well at some point, whether that's September or in the future. Input from others.
Could I ask Ron a clarifying question real quick?
Sure.
Ron, obviously, I hear you on the emphasis on Lions Clubs International Foundation. Is your request, though, for grant writing more generally with an emphasis on LCIF or just on LCIF as a partner?
I would say more generally. I mean, I think all of us need to find additional grant resources beyond just LCIF and our state Lions. I mean, my board has actually created an ad hoc committee that's solely geared towards how do we go out and find non-Lion donors. And so general grant writing would not be a bad thing either. I've got a pretty good idea on it. I've got staff that are really familiar with it from previous careers, but I'm lucky in that respect. I think that could be a strong boon for all of our foundations.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So I'm hearing an interest in general grant funding with a opportunity for specific information as part of that general grant funding presentation around LCIF opportunities that exist. I'm also hearing, based on survey results, hearing in air quotes, professional development was still of interest, but happy to table that if we want to. But that was a consensus among the survey respondents. Curious if anyone else has any other input. I'm just going to call out a few names, not to put you on the spot, but if we've not heard from you and you're interested in chiming in, that would be Beth, Wesley Brown, Mel Bray, Marianne, Doug. Just in the spirit of inclusion. Anyone have any input from any of those folks?
I'll jump in for a moment and just to express the appreciation of having this opportunity to interact with others with similar organizations around the country. Our organization has received funding from LCIF. In fact, we wouldn't have our optical lab and be making eyeglasses for low-income Oregonians without that. I think it'd be wonderful to have a LCIF or an LCI representative at some point that maybe could give some tips on how to position ourselves well to be able to have a successful grant proposal submitted to them. So that's my 2 cents for that topic.
Awesome. Thank you.
I don't have a lot to say. We've received a couple of LCIF grants this past year, and one of our staff members took a lead on the application process and really on the follow through. I think the follow through is just extremely as much important as even doing the grant, writing the grant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just like to say, like, I'd like to hear more about the ad hoc committee regarding looking at non-Lions for for funding opportunities, because as a director of development myself, it goes way beyond, trying to get money from LCIF, which of course is available, but it goes way beyond that. And the process is, from my own experience, has been very arduous and very long. So, obviously there are other funding sources that we have to be looking at. And I like the idea of that ad hoc committee. And I personally would like to know more about that, how that was formed, how it's being formed, what the content is around that. I mean, for me, that would be definitely one of the topic of interest that I would greatly benefit from. Um, yeah, I guess and also the professional development. I know PID Mel is going to be speaking on that, and I think I just would like to know a little bit more about that. Like, what is the Mel? I don't know if you even started thinking about it, but what that entails and what kind of professional development is that for individuals like ourselves, or I'm not quite sure what direction we're taking with professional development. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Well, first off, I didn't know I was going to be doing that. So
Oh,
I didn't start anything on it. When I filled out the survey, I put it, it's something I wanted more information on.
ah,
So
okay.
I don't, maybe I misread the question and didn't answer it the correct way. But yeah, professional development is something that we can all use. And I love the
Yeah.
idea of how you go out and get non-Lions. In our iBank at Ultravision, we've been very, very fortunate when we have things happen, like our spectron microscope just went very recently, and we were like, oh, 40, $50,000 in a hurry. Where are we going to get that from? And we actually had some donors that actually gave us the money to pay for it, which once we put out a word to them that we needed something special, they just wrote out the check and said, here you go, we're going to cover it. So we have not utilized LCIF and my 20 plus years on the board for the iBank in Philadelphia. So we haven't used them for an awful lot of things for all these years because we've always been able to find a more local source that didn't take money away from the Lions.
And I will answer real quickly on the ad hoc because it is, my ad hocs had two meetings. They've managed to put together a mission statement and clarify a general path that they want to work on. And that's about it. So to answer your question, Marianne, they're meeting monthly. I'm probably a good 6 months out before I'm going to actually start to have some meat and potatoes that I can share.
Mhm.
That being said, when we get further out, I will be happy. I mean, I'll probably, we're all, those of us that meet at the forum, I'll be happy to just kind of give a quick synopsis of where that committee's at. But
Great.
also then once I have some meat and potatoes, I'll, be happy to host a session to talk about what we've kind of found for what it's worth.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
This is all helpful input, and I definitely want to table this for the moment, but invite folks to share input via email to Daniel or myself that would maybe help guide us, an extension of the survey responses as we've brainstormed more and have the opportunities for connection like this. Sometimes it takes reconvening to get our minds, the wheels spinning a bit. So perhaps a short-term solution would be to ask folks to just share any input and maybe a short email that would help guide us, and we can kind of get a pulse again on the group to help guide, kind of more urgent and then less of interest. But we know we have June coming up around HR and if there are specific topics, obviously HR is a huge, human resources, a huge umbrella topic. If there are specific areas, we've heard a little about hiring. If there's retention you'd like to learn more about, strategies around, just anything human resources that we can share with Mel as he crafts his content to share, that would be helpful to guys. Excuse me. November, grant writing might be the avenue to go. Obviously, Ron Fruit could, share where he's at with the committee, but, just grant writing. Daniel, you were the one that specifically was interested in providing or willing to present on that topic. I'm happy to share what I know. At this point, it's likely that I'll be a virtual attendee based on personal reasons, although I wish I could attend. I don't think that I will. But I'm happy to join in by Zoom. And then perhaps we find someone from LCIF that could, kind of dovetail on the end for 10 minutes or so about, obviously it's a huge topic and gets very in depth, but if they could give a high level and then folks that might be interested in learning more would have a point of contact to directly connect with. So if that sounds like something that might be of interest for the group, that could be our plan, grant writing for September and have a piece of it, LCIF, but in general strategies. And we might even have, if you all think it would be of interest, as an extension of our introductions, a few minutes where we could each just share where we are, with our grant writing and grant funding and kind of best practices. Because I think sometimes we don't necessarily raise our hand as willing to present on a topic, but we have a lot of insights that we could share, right? What we think we've done well, or maybe what we think we haven't done well, right? And I think that you can learn what you don't want to do from someone else who's done it not so well, or you could learn what you do want to do. So that might be kind of an interesting approach with a few minutes of kind of an open table, round table discussion, and then some content, which Daniel, I'd be happy to tag team with you, not to say that I know more than you, but I'm happy to share, what I've learned because I largely have had that responsibility at three organizations now, three different nonprofits, and have kind of had to just learn by doing, which doesn't mean I know the the right way, but I think we're all probably in that role, right? We're small teams, not always paid staff, not CFREs all the time, and there's a lot of best practices or words of wisdom, what to do and what not to do. So if that sounds of interest to the group, that could be a plan for September. What do we think?
I think
I
that
like
sounds
the
good.
idea.
Yeah.
Good plan. Yeah, good plan.
Okay, awesome. Very
I was
good.
wondering in September, since I've never been to one of these meetings in person, is there time for us to actually, as a group of executive directors, to get together, other than just on that topic, for us to just really delve a little bit more than what we can do on Zoom, what's going on with each other's organization, to try to find out where maybe we can gain more information and from on different topics because I do this or somebody else does that and it's similar to what we do and that kind of thing. I just again, I've never been there, so my board is encouraging me to go, which is great.
Well, Beth,
Yeah.
Need to know.
if I can answer that for you and also tag on to what Lindy said. So one, let me finish, tag on to Lindy. Lindy, I agree with you 100%. For somebody from LCIF to be there and give a whole presentation may not be the best thing, where I think it's better to have them tag on 10 minutes and say, because they're different than what you do on the outside. And just that little part and that connection would be very well. So I will definitely reach out to Cassandra Berg and see who she wants to send or who's going to be there, because Cassandra has moved up. She and I are such a great friendship. I don't even know if she goes to forums anymore right, because of her position. But we'll definitely look at that. Beth, you're exactly right what this organization's about. And the meeting in person, when I did this years ago, we had a 2-day meeting. We had to fly there. We had to spend 2 extra nights in a hotel. We tied this group to the forum because it gives you the opportunity to meet, greet, hang out together. Let's go have lunch. Hey, yeah, I remember you. Yeah, let's, so that's exactly what this is about. So definitely, and this is like good, like, you and I might be able to have time at the forum to talk about Sight for Kids, where last weekend we didn't because I was too busy being an ID. So at the forum for that one day, we can go spend time and I can share what we do at Site for Kids. So absolutely, that's exactly what it's about, Beth.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And we'll work, I'm sure Chris and Lindy and I will spend some time between now and our June meeting putting a draft agenda for September together. We are kind of working on the assumption that we will have all day on Wednesday, September the 17th, to have a few speakers come in, to have some time for lunches and networking. And usually during the forum, LCIF has its own presentation as well. There's a session on LCIF if you're able to stay for the whole forum. Again, as Chris mentioned, we tagged this onto it so that you're really just paying for an extra night of the hotel room with the forum rather than going and traveling to a whole other venue for just its own standalone thing. So there's a lot of really great material at the forum. And that gives us more time to, like Chris said, make those one-on-one connections and maybe say, hey, would you like to get dinner on Friday night so that we can talk more about X, Y, or Z that came up. So we'll work on having an agenda for you at June to look at what we'll be doing in September so that we maximize that in-person time. And we'll have a full day prepared for the 17th. And Marianne, I apologize for not responding to the helpful information that you sent after our December meeting. It got buried in the year-end rush, and our family welcomed
It's
a
okay.
baby girl a few weeks ago. So we're adjusting to
Oh,
life as a family of four. So my apologies for letting that get buried, but
no
we'll be
problem. No
circling
problem.
back to finalize those details with you.
Absolutely. Happy to help. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this sounds like good discussion and guidance towards future opportunities for connection. And then, even beyond this year, hopefully we can continue. The topics will never run out. And I think we as leaders of Lions charitable organizations, our skill sets and our needs change on an ongoing basis. So hopefully not only these quarterly opportunities for connection will provide value to each of you, but also the opportunity to have someone that you think of that you might reach out to. Even just a phone call. Hey, how did you handle this? Right? It's sometimes hard to find folks in leadership of similar organizations, and so the opportunity that exists for each of us for connection, I think, is very strong, and we can help one another throughout. And as it's been mentioned, our organizations are different from many others, so not necessarily it's the easiest thing to find someone in one of those groups like Daniel mentioned, that exist in each state. They are very broad in who their members are, and so sometimes that might not be always your starting point, but this group might provide some folks, or then each of our respective networks. So, looking forward to the opportunity to learn from each other and learn from our speakers in future sessions. And speaking of, before we hear from Daniel on our presentation today, I'd like to just see if there are any announcements that would be relevant for the group on a short basis, so we can stay on our time frame. But we had allowed a little time on our agenda for announcements and that anyone might have. Daniel, I guess before you begin your presentation, you mentioned your announcement of your new edition. I was going to ask you because I thought I remembered you saying it was February that your wife was due when we were together in September. So, how are things with baby girl, and how's the family of four and the adjustments? Maybe that's our biggest announcement we'll let you share.
There you go. It's good. Mom and baby are both healthy and happy. In a lot of ways, the second baby was a lot easier than the first, but we're still in that early phase where the one thing we're not getting a whole lot of is sleep. So we're grateful for the caffeine and coffee, and we're keeping Starbucks well served and employed with our expenses right now, but we're doing very good and very excited for the new edition.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, you mentioned going to this from one to two is a little bit easier. I have four young children, so if you continue to have more, just know it gets easier each time. You just kind of, what's one more, right? No, I mean not meant to
Absolutely.
be
Yeah.
silly, but yeah. And then you get through that phase. I know it feels like you're in those trenches and it's, the sleep and it's just crazy, but then you blink a couple times and my one of mine just turned four, the other one's two, so it's hard to believe that they grow big and do great things. So that's coming for you. So awesome. Well, thank you for your willingness to share with us on our topic of interest for today, focusing on nonprofit board governance. Certainly, you have many skills and recommendations and insights to share with us that will help us with our board governance as we all seek to do our best in that role. So, if you would like to go ahead and begin your presentation, we welcome everything you're willing to share with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindy, and I'm excited to share on this. I want this to be helpful for you all, so I've got kind of an outline that I'll be working through, but please stop me. Don't wait till the end. If you've got a question or something, just take yourself off of mute. I've got two screens here, so I'm trying to watch, the chat box as well as the screen and all. So just take yourself off of mute if you have a question as we're working through. And I'll send these slides out to everyone afterwards as well. So don't worry about trying to frantically take notes as we go through. You'll have all this sent to you afterwards. Board governance is a critical component of the health of our organizations. We are nonprofits, and so we want to make sure that we understand some of the best practices for running those effectively. So I'll start with a quick overview of the nonprofit sector, and then dive into an overview of the board of directors specifically, and then review some of the key governing documents and leave you with a few resources. And hopefully at the end of this, our objectives, or my objectives for you, is to understand the function and purpose of a nonprofit board of directors, to explain a healthy board chair CEO relationship model. That particular relationship, the board chair CEO, is probably the most important single relationship to the health and to the success of your organizations, and then help boards to be better leaders. I really hope that these might be things that you take back to your various boards. A lot of what I'm sharing with you is pulled from our board member orientation. So when we get new board members on, we have an orientation process, and this comes in large part from that orientation. So feel free, as you find things relevant and helpful, to use that. Feel free to use what I refer to as the case theory, copy and steal everything. That's very helpful in the nonprofit sector. And then I want to help you identify some helpful operating systems and reporting frameworks that are relevant to the board roles. So let's dive in with a quick overview of the nonprofit sector to help us understand the industry. We've got three main sectors in America: the private sector for business and industry, the public sector for government and public educational systems, and then the nonprofit sector, which is charitable organizations, membership organizations, professional associations. There's a lot that falls under that. When you hear the term nonprofit, I think it's helpful to clarify what you mean, because there are many types of nonprofits. Most of our organizations are 501c3 charities. They're independent, they're registered with the IRS. But then there are also professional and trade associations. There are national social welfare organizations, and those would include Lions Clubs. All Lions Clubs are organized as 501c4 nonprofits under the corporate umbrella of Lions International. There is an important distinction between those Lions Club 501c4s and the charities, the 501c3s. The most practical difference between the two is that you don't immediately get a tax deduction receipt for contributions to a 501c4. But the benefit is 501c4s have a virtually unlimited cap on the advocacy and the public policy work that they can do. That advocacy is limited for 501c3 charities. Charities can advocate, they can lobby, but they cannot utilize more than 20% of their resources, or depending on the size of your budget, there's a sliding scale that the IRS utilizes to make sure that you're not overly benefiting from the tax deductions and the charitable status that you have as a 501c3. So honestly, that presents some very unique opportunities for our 501c3 charities to partner with 501c4 Lions Clubs to really leverage the distinctives between those two entities. That's something that we're trying to strike a better balance with in South Carolina to help with pursuing public policy initiatives, because there are a lot of very relevant policy proposals that we can pursue that are tied to our mission. And then there are also social organizations, which are 501c7s. I honestly don't know exactly how many types of nonprofits there are, but I would imagine, given that we're a government entity or that it's related to a government entity, there's probably quite a few. So what is the nonprofit sector? There's over 1.5 million organizations. I need to update this information, but as of 2016, there were over almost $4 trillion in assets tied up in nonprofit organizations, and nonprofits accounted for 10% of the workforce, and about 25% of Americans volunteer. And of course, we give about $500 billion to organizations over the course of the year. So that is the industry in which we're all operating. So our board of directors are the key leaders in our spheres. So let's dive into those key roles. We're going to get into some specifics. There are 10 duties that I'll share that every board member has. But to break it down, they can all really fit in three broad buckets that are these key roles of the board of directors. Set the organizational direction, provide oversight, and ensure necessary resources. If you want to distill the most core functions of a board of directors into the simplest group, it's these three entities. And I think it's important for us, particularly working with volunteer boards, to help board members understand their lane. How many of us can point to a situation where a board member wanted to get just a little too involved in the day-to-day operations of the organization? The board members are supposed to set the organizational direction. Maybe that is saying, hey, we need to expand our clinic network, so we're going to try to build a new clinic in XYZ community. That's the strategic direction that the board plays. Board members should not be on the committee that decides how that building is going to look, what the colors of the carpet are going to be, and what the rooms look like. Those are all very practical, tactical decisions. So there's a strategic level of operation, and then there's a practical level of implementation. And we want to help board members distinguish between those. And you might be in a situation like our organization where, because of the small size of our staff, we only have four full-time paid employees. We have to sometimes straddle the line between inviting board members to do specific task-oriented things to help us increase our bandwidth while making sure that they're staying primarily in their governance or their strategic lane, because that's really what they're supposed to be doing as fiduciaries of the organization. So I'm going to run quickly through these 10 responsibilities or 10 duties of board members. You want to determine the mission and purpose, hire and fire and manage the president and CEO, protect assets, set strategy and advance the mission, govern. Board members need to make the easy and the hard decisions, be an ambassador, ensure the organization has adequate resources. That doesn't just mean personally giving. You might have heard the phrase give, get, or get off. I don't personally think that's a super helpful mantra for us. There's a lot of ways that board members can make meaningful contributions to our organizations, but there is a financial aspect to that. The board is responsible for making sure that the organization has the resources it needs to succeed. That also means board members have a role to play in fundraising, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Set organizational metrics and measure success. That's going to be very important for keeping the board in their governance lane. Once the board understands what to measure and what success looks like, it's a lot easier for them to relinquish some of that tactical day-to-day decision-making ability to the staff that they have hired and entrusted the organization to. And be self-perpetuating. This is really important because board members need to constantly be helping with the recruitment effort so that we have the next generation of board members. I hope all of your boards have term limits. If not, please, if you don't get anything else from this, please help your board understand the value of term limits for the organization. There's nothing that says that really effective and good board members can't come back after taking a sabbatical or a season away, but it's not healthy and it sets some really unhealthy power dynamics in the organization if you don't have term limits for your board of directors. They are a wonderful gift, but they have to pass the torch at some point, and ensure that the next generation of leadership is ready to take the helm. And then, of course, we want board members to be active as well. So to get started, determining the mission and purpose of the organization, the board has to make sure that the mission is focused and well understood. Why do you exist? what would happen if your organization ceased to operate tomorrow? That might be a good question to pose to your board in an open discussion at your next board meeting. Why is it important that our charities function? If Lions Vision Services went away, what would South Carolina lose because of that? What would be the gap in the community? The better your board understands the unique niche that they fill in the industry and in the sector, the more effective your board will be at advocating for your organization and sharing why your organization is important with others, including non-Lions, which has been a recurring topic of conversation for us today. Your organization is adding value to non-Lions members in the community. Help them understand what would happen if your organization wasn't there. And that also gets into what does your organization do better than any other organization of its kind? We made the decision recently in our strategic planning process to hand off our hearing aid program to Hearing Charities of America, which is the same partner that Lions International uses. The cost of hearing aids was increasing. In fact, the last year we did a cost benefit analysis. It was costing us, on average, as much to provide a hearing aid to a client as it was for us to provide a sight-saving eye surgery for a client. And a lot of that has to do with the new technology and the new devices around hearing aids that audiologists are using. Our Lions really wanted us to stay focused on sight and making sure that vision remained the primary focus of our organization. So we had to look at the numbers and say, is this directly relevant to our mission? Is this helping us end blindness and poverty in South Carolina? Hearing aids are not really helping us end blindness and poverty in South Carolina. So we handed that program off to another organization that could better manage that, and that freed up a lot of our resources. And we've seen tremendous growth in our eye surgery program following that decision. And that wasn't just because of that one decision, but that certainly helped us have better capacity for the eye surgery services that we provide. And then, are you in personal alignment with the mission and purpose? Does anybody, I won't call anybody out, but does anybody have an example from a board meeting that you've been to where you just leave the meeting asking yourself, does this board member really care? Are they really invested in the organization? Or are they literally just here for, out of a sense of obligation? Did somebody nominate them and they feel like they have to be there? Are they in there because they hold another office and they have to be there and they don't really want to be? I think we've all probably, we can think of that person. Maybe it's somebody currently on your board. Maybe it's somebody that you've had the ability to um, bless and release to go on to other things. But when that's not a good fit, it doesn't work well for anybody involved. And then avoid mission creep is another direct connection to the mission and purpose. The main personnel decision that our boards have to make is to manage the CEO. The board hires, fires, and manages the CEO performance. I think it's critical for our boards to understand you decide who's in the CEO spot, which is us for the most part, those of us on this call. But then you need to trust the CEO to manage the rest of the staff. It's one thing if you, as the CEO, are asking maybe an ophthalmologist on your board for help hiring an eye care specialist for a clinic or an outreach initiative that you're doing. It's fine to tap into the expertise of the board in some of those areas, but the only employee that the board is responsible for is the CEO. And we as CEOs need to be empowered by the board to manage our staffs. Now, certainly the way we do that and the effectiveness with which we do that, that can be part of our annual evaluation with the board of directors. And if there are problems, those should be addressed. But I think it's incredibly important that boards not get into the day-to-day responsibilities of hiring and managing other staff members. That's a critical delineation of lanes and roles that we need to make sure that we have. And I want to spend a minute talking to you about the delineation between the board chair and the executive director. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a critical relationship for the organization. And looking at kind of the big buckets of our operations, staff, supervision, strategy, program development, budget, and board building. I'm not going to go through all of this. Again, you'll have this slide for you afterwards, but There's a lane and there's a role for the executive director. There's a lane and a role for the board chair, and there is some overlap. There are some shared responsibilities there. But I think we need to help our board leadership understand what these lanes are. We need them to understand why it's important that the board chair not have the managerial responsibility of the CEO in terms of keeping up with the rest of the staff. We need to help delineate how the executive director supports the board in the budgeting process. We obviously want to have a seat at the table as executives in the board recruitment process, but that really needs to be a board-driven and a board-led procedure. So I hope this chart might be able to help you and your teams think about how you can better manage that critical executive director board chair relationship and how those fit together. Obviously, protecting legal assets and being a good fiduciary is a critical role for trustees. That is ultimately why we even have insurance for our board members. They have a legal responsibility, and they need to understand that. They need to understand one of the expenses they approve in their budget every year is insurance for them because of the legal responsibilities they possess. That translates or should translate to helping board members be prepared for board meetings. Quick poll of the group. Do any of your boards use the consent agenda format? Have any of you heard of the consent agenda format before? I see one or two head nods. Yeah. It's so the we've all been at that meeting where we get about halfway through or we get to the end and realize, wow, that really could have been handled in an email, right? We spend all this time gathering reports, and then we spend all this time regurgitating those reports as if the people that we're speaking to are illiterate and can't read what's in front of them. And then we all leave patting ourselves on the back, but we haven't really done anything. We haven't really accomplished anything. Well, the consent agenda format is one way to help streamline board meetings so that you can get board members better prepared. What the consent agenda does is basically the minutes and all of the reports except for the treasurer's report and the CEO's report are put into the consent agenda. And that is an item right at the beginning of the meeting that the board approves. And the board members have an opportunity to say they have a question about an item on the consent agenda. So maybe your programs committee submitted a report and a board member has a question about it. Well, when you have the consent agenda being reviewed, if anybody has a question, you pull that item from the consent agenda out and you put it under new business. And everything that's left is approved in the consent agenda at one time with no discussion on each individual line item. So it cuts out a lot of that basically regurgitation of what the reports are, and it helps you get to the new business. It helps you get to the discussion. That's allowed us to actually add a line item in our board agenda for strategic conversations. These might be things like, we're trying to create a new event and we have specific questions for the board about what the outcomes and measurements and the keys for success for that event look like. So we can have a strategic conversation about those critical points or maybe those pressure points that we're feeling because we have more time now that we're not going through each individual committee report or reading the minutes verbatim to the group. The consent agenda cuts out a lot of that. Now, it does require board members to be prepared for meetings. They have to have read the consent agenda ahead of time. So you've got to get it to them sooner than the day before or an hour before the meeting. We try to give our board members at least the weekend before the meeting. And we typically meet on Wednesdays. So we try to send it by the end of business on Friday, the week before at the latest, earlier if we can manage it. But that does put some responsibility back on the board and give them the opportunity to engage with that material on their own. But we need to make sure that they understand what they're reading, how to process things like financial documents. We believe very much in transparency. You can go on our website, you can go to our finances page, you can see our audits. You can see our 990s. You can see breakouts and visualizations from our annual report on our financial charts. You can see our candid profiles, our charity navigator profiles, all of that we put out there for the public. We believe in being transparent to our stakeholders. That's a blessing and a curse because sometimes you get people thinking they know what they're doing, looking at those documents and asking a question about an asset on a balance sheet that frankly is not really a relevant question to the health of the organization. So it's a double-edged sword, but we take the challenges that come with that because we want to foster that transparency to our stakeholders and to our public. But that's something that the board should be involved in helping to promote that trust and transparency and protection of assets. The board also sets the strategy and advances the mission. This is one of the most important roles of the board. They've got to eat, sleep, and breathe that strategic plan. One of the things that we've implemented at Lions Vision Services is the traction process. Has anyone read the book Traction by Gino Wickman before? If you're looking for an operating system, this might be a helpful tool for you. The Vision Traction Organizer, in fact, our entire strategic plan fits on this one sheet of paper, front and back, the whole thing. Our core values, our focus, our 10-year target, all of our marketing strategies. The plan itself covers a 3-year time period, and there are very specific measurables for what our organization will look like at the end of that 3-year period. So that whole first page is predominantly set by the board. The second page is what staff manage. We're the ones that look at that when budget time starts, when we start getting prepared for the next budget. We look at the 3-year picture and say, okay, which of these items are we going to take off the shelf and focus on achieving this fiscal year? So we create the 1-year plan based on the 3-year picture, knowing that at the end of those 3 years, we've got to have checked all of those 3-year box pictures. We then break that down from a 1-year plan into a 90-day action plan. And that's what the rocks section is called. You've probably heard the analogy of if you've got rocks, sand, and water, and you're trying to fit it into a container, how do you get it all in? You don't start by putting the water in and then adding sand and then putting the rocks in. It's not gonna all fit. You start with the rocks, and those are the critical objectives that we know as a staff, if nothing else gets accomplished, and other things will not get accomplished if we're focusing on those rocks. But those 90-day rock objectives, those are what we're held accountable for at weekly staff meetings, at quarterly staff planning retreats. We know that our performance is evaluated based on our success or failure of hitting those 90-day objectives. So what that does is it breaks down a aspirational 10-year vision to a more manageable 3-year plan, because I think we've all found since the COVID pandemic, the days of actual detailed 5 and 10-year strategic plans are gone. Too much can change, too much can happen for us to possibly think that we can create a roadmap, a detailed roadmap for a 10-year period of time. But we want to know the general direction that we're moving towards. And then we break that down into these more manageable sets. This operating system has been transformational for our organization. It helps everyone see the role that they play. It helps everyone feel like they're making a valuable contribution to the organization. And it streamlines the strategic plan into an actual living, breathing, accessible document. It's not a 5-inch binder that's collecting dust on a shelf in somebody's office somewhere, but it's something that we're regularly using and reviewing in our practical day-to-day lives. You also need board members that are going to make the easy decisions and the hard decisions. We've already touched on this a little bit, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But board members need to understand the nonprofit sector, and they need to not confuse governance with management. They need to stay in their lane. But they also need to avoid conflicts of interest. And I think this is one area that's important for us to linger on in the Lions charity sector, because many of us are one charity among others, at least one charity in addition to Lions Clubs International Foundation, that Lions are competing for dollars for. We're trying to make the case for why our charities and our organizations should be part of club budgets and individual philanthropy plans. And we need to make sure that the board members that are making those asks don't have a conflict of interest. If they are actively soliciting funds for another organization that is competing in the exact same space and arena that we are, we need to acknowledge that. And we need to work at the board level to mitigate those potential conflicts of interest. Just because there is a conflict doesn't mean that you have to kick that board member out, but there needs to be a process where those board members can disclose that conflict of interest. And then the executive committee can work with that board member to manage that conflict of interest. And hopefully, this is something that is part of the application process as your board is reviewing applicants for potential new board members. We're very transparent. Every new potential board member to our organization gets a copy of our conflict of interest policy ahead of time. And before they sign off, we review that and make sure that there isn't anything that warrants further conversation. We also have an annual board commitment form. So this is separate from our board application to join, but it's an annual commitment that helps us ensure that we have 100% board member participation in giving. That is important because most of our community foundation and corporate foundation grants that we're applying for, they want to know what percentage of your board supports your organization. And they look at that. They ask critical questions about that. So if we've got a pledge from a board member, we can count that towards their participation in the giving. But it also gives us an annual chance to review that conflict of interest policy and make sure that nothing's changed because life happens, things come up, things happen. We also want board members to be ambassadors for the organization. It's important for them to wear their badge proudly and to be our voice in the community. We want board members that are going to show up at Chamber of Commerce events or regional industry events that will have that name badge and that lapel pin for our Lions charity that will help get the word out about what we're doing and how we can partner with other groups. We also want to tap into our board member networks. Maybe there's a connection where you can have board members host a small gathering from their neighborhood or their circle at their house. The board member handles the food and the beverages. They bring you as staff in to do the presentation about the organization, and they let you manage the fundraising ask or the email sign up ask. So they don't feel like they have to be the one pestering their network. They're just helping with the food and drinks. But it gives you the opportunity to get in front of influential people that are in your board member networks in a more casual setting and in a way that might help us reach some of those non-Lion members in the community as well. We found some success with that. It's also critical that the board ensure that the organization have adequate resources. It's the board's responsibility. They don't just approve the budget and then say, all right, sayonara, see you next year. Well, they've got to be involved in getting those resources to the table. And usually our budgets involve a little bit of a stretch. They involve us saying, we're going to have to find some new revenue. That's not the executive director or the director of development's sole responsibility. Board members have a responsibility to get those dollars into the door. Ask your board member if they found themselves in an elevator with Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and they had 3 floors to convince them to give to their organization. Or maybe Mackenzie Scott, because Mackenzie Scott's foundation has had some open grant requests over the past few years with her network. How would you convince them to invest in your Lions charity? Make sure that your board members have that elevator pitch down and make sure that it's consistent with your branding and imaging. You don't want board members selling potential new donors on a different vision or a different view of your organization than what you actually have. So that's an important thing for us to implement into, and that can be a good kind of like role-playing element to a board orientation. Practice those elevator pitches, get comfortable with them. You also want to make sure that your board helps set organizational metrics and measurements of success. We've all heard the SMART objectives before, but we want to make sure that the board is confident and comfortable with how we're measuring our organization. And I would put forward that it's helpful to think about ways to measure not just the financial health of the organization, but how are we actually achieving an impact in our community? There's a framework called results-based accountability, or RBA. It's based off of a book called Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, which is by Mark Friedman. I highly encourage you to read this book if you have not read it. If you partner with community foundations or corporate foundations, a growing number of them are going to be asking you grant questions based on this RBA framework. And just to give you a quick rundown of what that entails, RBA is a way to clarify definition of terms and to help focus on ends rather than means. RBA framework clarifies results or outcomes as a condition of well-being for children, adults, families, or communities. That outcome is what we are working towards as an organization. We might have indicators or benchmarks, which are things that help us quantify the achievement of a result. And we might have performance measures that help us identify how well programs are working. But it's that outcome, it's that different condition of well-being that our organizations are ultimately working towards. How does the eye care services that we provide actually contribute to a healthier community for our state, for our city, for our region? But don't confuse the means, which is the programmatic means, that's the practical means of how we operate with the actual end result that we're trying to achieve. It's really easy for us to get focused on means because programs are easy to communicate, they're easy to understand, they're easy to quantify, but it's that end state that we're working towards that is often loftier. It's often a little bit harder to think about, and it puts more responsibility on us to really be transparent about what are we doing and is what we're doing actually making an impact the way our mission needs it to in the community. There's a quadrant that RBA utilizes that analyzes the quantity and the quality of the work that we do and analyzes the effort we put in as well as the effect that that work creates. And the most important quadrants are ultimately it's that bottom right quadrant of effect and quality. Is anyone better off? What is the quality of life change in someone as a result of the services that we're providing? How is the community healthier because of the eye care access that we're providing through our organizations? There's a lot more that I could say about this. Again, the entrepreneurial operating system is the operating system that we've adopted to help us run, but this RBA framework is the framework that we've adopted for how we think about our impact and our role in the community. And the combination of those two things has fueled our staff optimization and our strategic focus on health outcomes in our community. And the combination of those two things has really led to some exciting progress for our organization. Be self-perpetuating. We've talked about this. The board has to own this process. They've got to be the ones that are responsible for bringing in new board members and making sure that you're hitting the optimum board level. You might have varying opinions on this. I know there's different views even represented on our call here about the size of our board of directors. I would say, based on the advice that I've received over my career and based off of my experience, the ideal board makeup is somewhere between 16 and 19 individuals, somewhere in that period. If you get much below 16, you really don't have enough of a critical mass to get things done. And if you get much above 20, you have too many chefs in the kitchen. You just have too big of a group to manage. Now, my friend Chris has a pretty extreme example where they've got to rent a convention center every time they want to have a board meeting, and they've got over 50, in fact, closer to 100 actual board members on the roster. Chris, I would be curious to hear how has that impacted y'all's ability to make decisions as an organization over the years?
Well, yeah, we actually have between 50 and 55 voting board members each year, depending on how many past presidents are voting. And then we have non-voting board members, which are advisors, which are basically in line to become a voting board member. Of course, you can imagine being volunteers, you don't always get 100 people to show up to a quarterly board meeting. But we do get about 50 to 60 board members or, voting and non-voting board members. It has created a little bit of an issue because One thing that Daniel said is we have to be very careful that the board members understand what lane they're in and that they don't control the staff. They only, their job is to talk to me and say, hey, you know what? Can we do this and can we do that instead of calling the staff and saying, I want you to do this. I'm a board member. And I've had that issue before. But also you got to keep them activated and ask them to participate. So you have that balance. It's a difficult balance from saying, I need your help with this fundraiser. I need your help to find additional funds. I need your help with the strategic plan. But running the foundation, and Daniel, you put it very well, deciding if we're going to have a new clinic is their job. Deciding how we're going to create that clinic and what color we're going to paint the walls is not. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge, but it also, and I will say this, it brings it back to me because when you got so many different people and so many different ideas, it just gets to the point where nobody's making any decisions and they're not doing anything. So it really does fall back on me to say, okay, guys, we got to do this. So it is, I agree with Daniel that 15 is a good mark. 20 is a little bit too high.
Yeah. So that's something to think about, as you're helping your board to find that optimum level of how they can operate and function. It's a lot easier to manage recruitment for 20 board members than it is for 30, 40, or 50 as well. So, again, having terms is really helpful. We've actually developed a system at LVS where the initial board term is just for 1 year. That's all they're committed to. And that's really an orientation period where both the board and the board member are making sure, we've gone through a vetting process, we've gone through a candidate interview process, but we're just making sure in practice that that person is still a good fit for the board of directors. And at the end of that 1 year period, the board takes a vote. The Personnel and Governance Committee does the initial screening and recommendation, and then that's sent to the full board where they decide, do we want to extend an invitation for this individual to take a full term, which is a 3 year term. And then we also make sure that the board member wants to continue, that this has been a worthwhile exercise for them. So both parties have to say yes at that 1 year mark, that this is a good fit. And that's helped us avoid some major issues where, you might end up being stuck with somebody depending on your board policies for 3, 4, 5, even 6 years, depending on your board terms. Then they can run for a second 3 year term with the same kind of vetting process of both the board and the candidate, making sure that it's a good fit. And then if it's a really spectacular situation, they can extend that for 1 more year. So at most, you've got an 8 year cap on how long a person can serve on our board. And then they have to take at least a year off. And that gives us the chance to make sure that other board members are stepping into those leadership roles and that we're building that pipeline of talent with the organization. And one person isn't becoming concentrated in authority or influence. And then finally, you want to be an active board member. You want to make sure that your board members are getting the most out of their involvement, that they're coming to meetings prepared, that they're involved and engaged on committees, and that they're being honest if they don't have the time for this, that there's a graceful way for them to step back because you don't want to damage their reputation in the community, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it's a good fit for everybody involved. And you want your board to have fun. It's good to have laughter at board meetings. It's good to make sure that there's true camaraderie and fellowship. And we've had to balance being a statewide organization that's trying to get geographic representation from 46 counties, and South Carolina is a comparatively small state geographically, with making our meetings accessible to board members through virtual platforms. So balancing that and giving our board the opportunity for that in-person connection and chemistry, but then the annual accessibility for our quarterly meetings and our business meetings, that's a delicate needle to thread, but it helps ensure that board members are being active and contributing. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the governing documents section. These are those I's that we have to dot and T's that we have to cross. I'd be happy to linger on any of these if you have questions about them, but I basically provided two lists, one of essential governing documents. These are things that you better have as an organization if you're going to be a nonprofit in the United States. You've got to have a incorporation certificate, an IRS letter, Secretary of State registration. Depending on where you are and depending on where you're soliciting funds, you might actually have multiple Secretary of State registrations in different states. I think for the most part, probably the majority of us are only looking at one state or maybe some of the states immediately around us. So that may not be as big of a burden for everyone. Your bylaws, your policy, your budget, your audit. I would really encourage the audit piece. We have found if you want really strategic and substantive relationships with major funders, they're going to ask for an audit. You're going to need to make the investment of saying you're not just doing an annual budget process, you're paying to have a professional, objective third party come in and audit your books every year. Um, the organizations that are getting those bigger grant partnership commitments and those bigger corporate commitments all have to do that. So I would put that in the essential category. But maybe if you're just starting out or if you've got a small budget and $5,000 is too much for an audit, then maybe there's other ways that you can work towards getting that in the future. But then you've got other important governing documents. These might be different profiles that you have on some of the nonprofit watchdog groups. These might be various specific policies that are important to make sure are being updated regularly and reviewed regularly, at least every 3 years. Make sure some professional from each industry is looking at your gift acceptance policy or your employee policy manual or your investment policy. Whatever your policies and procedures are, things change so quickly. You want to make sure you're keeping up with both current legal requirements as well as best practices in the industry. And finally, I want to leave you with a few resources where you can be better equipped to explore these at greater length. I have looked at a lot of resources and things over the years, and I intentionally made this list as small as I could, looking at professional associations, a few key books, and a few key websites. We can't possibly absorb all the information that exists out there for how to run these organizations and how to work in this industry. So we've got to be selective. We've got to pick the groups and the resources that are going to be the biggest return on investment. Again, the two biggest books for me are Traction, which is our operating system, and Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, which is our reporting framework. But Good to Great in the Social Sectors by Jim Collins is a phenomenal practical book on how to become better at what we do. Asking is the best and most succinct fundraising book that exists. It's by far the most accessible and practical for board members. And then the other nonprofit textbook that I refer to almost on a weekly basis that has been so helpful is a fundraising guide for nonprofit board members. That's part of I think it's the AFP professional development series. It is just one of those books that I constantly go back to because of how accessible and helpful it is. And then I've got three newsletters or websites, Board Source, Winkler Group, and The Agitator. I can't read everything that comes into my email inbox, but when I get an email from one of those three groups, I always make sure to take time to read it and keep up with those resources. So with that, I'll leave you with this quote from actually the author of that Asking fundraising book, kind of the grandfather in the fundraising world. Because of your service, you play a significant role in changing lives and saving lives. You are charged with keeping in trust the fate and fortune of your organization. You are the future. You are the organization's destiny. So help your board members have that aspirational view of what they're doing by serving as a board member to help them get excited, get involved, and lead your organization to greater heights of success. So with that, I've got my personal contact information on here, but you can always reach out to me through our Lions Vision Services email as well. And I'll be glad to use the 5 minutes or so. I can stay on past 1:30 as well if folks have additional questions. But the time we have left to answer any questions that you might have or just see where y'all would like to take the conversation from here.
I have one question just to get started. Is every member of your board a lion?
No.
And does your board have your board does have spots for non-lions?
Yes, so we are obligated by our bylaws to keep at least 51%, so a governing majority of our board as active members of a Lions Club. But we have probably closer to a 60-40 split, where about 40% of our board currently are not Lions Club members.
Okay. We have a slot, we have 4 slots for non-Lions, and every time they've tried to bring on one, this is way before I started, but it's not been very successful because I don't know if this happens with you guys, but our board meetings are always tied around the Council of Governor meetings. So they're always on a Saturday. They're always 1:30 or 3:30 in the afternoon. And it's maybe not that conducive. But I also think one of the issues we have is that there is no allowance for a non-lion to be on the executive part of the board.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, we have certainly found that it's harder to get board members that are not Lions to things like our annual meeting, which is tied to our state Lions convention every year. But our board meetings are separate. So we're not trying to get non-Lion members to Council of Governors meetings or cabinet meetings or things like that. We do have all of our board are part of what we call our Speakers Bureau. So they're actively going and presenting to Lions clubs and advocating in Lions circles. But actually, right now, our immediate past board chair and our board treasurer, so two of the biggest leadership positions in our board, are non-Lion members. And they've been very well received by our Lions community. They've been very impressed with their performance in those leadership roles.
Out of curiosity, with the rest of the group, what do you experience with that, with your bylaws?
Beth, for our organization, we don't have everyone has to be a Lion, and I think that's limited our folks that are actively participating as board members. We have actually right now 34 board members, which to your point, Daniel, is more than I would like to have to manage, and so I don't get to have those relationships. They do, thankfully, we have term limits or terms. That was implemented right around the time I started. So past presidents previously were lifers, if you will, and if they were a president at any point, they were still forever, even if they didn't intend to be. And the way that I helped encourage and open the in 3 years, and I was looking at board attendance when I came on board, and it turns out he wasn't attending because he had been deceased for 2 years. So that was very eye-opening. It's just like, well, of course he's not going to attend, and he's not receiving our materials because he's not alive. So we have 2-year term limits. Our president term are single term years, but they have 3 years of VP leading up to that. So that helps. But our legal counsel, who had just retired in December, had encouraged us reconsidering that, to have more than 1 year as president, because just when we get in a workflow and a good relationship, even though they've been VP, they're only 1 year officially in that, president, then they're rolling off and someone else is coming in. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and appreciate the information you shared, Daniel, which is very helpful. And I think it also is helpful to know what others are doing in their organizations and finding to be helpful, because I think sometimes that changes the tone of the conversation to not that it's just something that I want selfishly, but that could be advantageous for our execution of our mission in greater ways with more diverse representation. It's wonderful to have statewide trustees, but not limiting ourselves to just Lions, because not everyone can or wants to be a Lions Club member to be therefore considered to have input into our organization. So that's a little bit about our situation.
One of the things that I felt that this organization did for me years past, and the one that I was in, it disbanded in 2010. So that shows you how far back having an organization with like-minded executive directors has been. Is the fact that we have an opportunity to share each other's thoughts, our practices. Daniel, thank you for that presentation. It was very good. I actually wrote down some notes, and I'll be calling on you for some of your your documents. Okay, I think it would very much help my organization. But we have to understand that each one of our organizations, even though we're Lions related, are different. Like I said, I have 100 board members. They're not all voting. Half of them are voting, half of them are non-voting, getting, learning to come up. And like Daniel said, learning to see, is this something I want to stay with or not? So you don't get somebody at a 3-year term, they come on for 6 months and find out, nah, I can't fit it in my life. So, we have the way that we do our things. Yes, every one of our board members have to be a lion. Um, Beth, I understand it, and I don't know the whole history of Georgia Lions Lighthouse slash Georgia Lighthouse and how it changed and the name Lions came off and different things like that. But it's a whole different challenge what you're dealing with because you have bigger grants, you're reaching out to more more of the community, maybe like Daniel's is, where my organization is strictly Lions money. We don't get grants from outside. We don't get funding, and we don't have those non-lion members on our board because that's not the focus we look at. And then sometimes that affects the direction of your organization. When you bring those non-lions members in, then maybe their direction is something different than what lions. Lions are very unique. We don't always do the right thing. We do what we feel is the popular thing, right? Because there's a past president that wants this or wants that, right? So it really is a very unique situation, how our boards are all set up.
Daniel, I just wanted to commend you on this presentation. It was really good. I've seen a lot of and been to a lot of different presentations for board governance, and I have to say this is probably the best one I've ever attended. I took a lot of notes, and I'm looking forward to your PowerPoint presentation. And I'm sure I'm going to have more questions. Love the resources. I'm a resource person, so I love to have those resources in my back pocket. They're very helpful. In my note taking, RBA, is that what you said? What does that stand for? What is you said it's a tracking system,
Yeah, it's a reporting framework. It's a way of
reporting
thinking
framework,
about how we're making an impact in the community. And it's results-based accountability is the full name.
results-based accountability. Okay. I was writing so fast I didn't write down exactly what it stood for. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
uh,
the trying hard is not good enough.
okay,
It's
okay,
it's
great.
fairly accessible. It's not a huge book. It's a pretty good
Yeah,
read. Very practically oriented, again, kind of for practitioners. So you're not gonna have to wade through a bunch of like lofty academic intellectual knowledge.
great, great. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. And Chris, to your point, we actually ran some numbers recently because Lions love to know how they can leverage their giving. They want to know what's my return on investment, how can you stretch? So we look at our non-Lions grant and foundation giving as another way we can say, hey, we're not just asking you to do this, we're going into the community and we're asking others. So just from a Lions to non-Lions leverage support, we can turn every dollar that Lions give us and leverage that into $1.60 in other outside community support. So we can almost double their investment by what they give us. And if you look more specifically for Lions Club members, so just individuals, we can leverage their giving $1 to about $3 in what we can get from outside sources. Lions clubs, because that number is going down, unfortunately for us, that leverage is even higher, $1 to about $3.60 that we can leverage that. So that was another way we could help kind of sell Lions on this outside revenue to say, hey, this is a way we can leverage your gift. This is a way we can leverage your investment.
Right. I agree 100%. In fact, I guess to my point was I really look forward to this organization and the future of what I can learn from you guys because, we're out of time, so to speak, but I've got 30 minutes worth of questions to ask you, right? And it's all about oh, we lost Doug. It's all about guys telling me, or we learning, I learn from you because I know that my organization needs to get to the outside market. Okay. To that point where we need to do that, where the Lions money and the shaking the cans is drying up a little bit. And if we want to get to the next level, I need to get them to look outside of the Lions world, but understand that we have to monitor that and control that in the way that the Lions will see fit. So I look forward to learning a lot more from you guys. We might have to do another topic, another session just on this same topic, just so we could share each other's association with, what we do.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean,
I'll
Beth,
Thank
I
you,
think you
Daniel,
would be
so
a great
much.
facilitator for that one. I know Georgia does a tremendous job of leveraging other community sources of support in what y'all do there.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I'll add to that, Chris. I think it's yeah, I think we would all agree, Lions are very supportive and very instrumental and vital to our organizations, but I think there's a whole new opportunity for just great success and growth, when you go outside of Lions, but also being mindful how that is going to be received by Lions, right? And so when I came on board at Kentucky Lions Eye Foundation, I had never heard of being a lion except, the animal. I mean, really. So I did some research. I was asking someone on one of my interviews, what is your PID in front of your name? I mean, I had no clue. And the previous executive director, I think, would admit, like, she was doing very little fundraising and grant writing. And so it was depending on the little bit from Lions and then drawing off of investments to operate. So I was like, well, we've got to turn this over because I had seen what that could do for previous organizations I was at, individual giving, and just opening opportunities for people. So I think we could still diversify even further, but I think in the beginning probably rocked the waters a little bit and some people were like, whoa, what's going on here? But now they've seen what we've been able to accomplish thanks to our diversification and being, not depending just on Lions clubs who, yes, do great and help fund and they help with, the work that we do, but we would be limiting ourselves if we only depended on them, right? We wouldn't be able to get where we are. And I think that a lot of these organizations having an element of both is healthy for sustainability, especially. I think, Lions Club membership is down and clubs are hurting to replace, members that are passing away or no longer involved. And, inviting others to the table to get involved is vital, I think.
I think, and two, the fact that, yes, vision was the very first imperative for Lions to support and be a part of. But there are so many things now that are out there that they've got options for donating to and collecting items for that it really waters down the funding availability for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like you said, like it's been said, I think we could go on for a whole nother session about, just input and thoughts from others, but hopefully we got wheels spinning a little bit and, some new ideas or opportunities. Daniel, we appreciate not only your time and your presentation, but sharing that. That might help, with some individual follow-ups. I know I like your idea of the annual board expectation or recommitment form. I think that's a good thing, and we do that when it's time for a new term, but not every year in between, in our case, 2-year terms. So I think it's helpful just to reframe and make sure people are still invested in the mission and the why, and if you haven't seen the Simon Sinek, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, his TED talk on why, I kind of take our board back to that a lot. The how, the what, the when, those things will all work themselves out. But at the core of what we're doing is our why, right? And if things come back to that mission and guide us, then we'll figure the what and the how, and maybe not with the board input, not what colors to paint the walls, but if they believe in the why and it supports, what we're doing, I think things like that and some of your books and resources are really helpful to reground us and to not get caught up in sometimes those random questions. If your board's like mine, that, they have the best of intentions, but they come out of left field with something and you're like, oh my goodness, let's rein it back in with a mission moment or a story or an impact, reminder. So very good.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything else that I believe we needed to definitively talk about. Is there anything, other closing remarks or anything we didn't discuss before we end our time together today?
I want to say thank you, Daniel, for a great presentation. Thank you, Lindy, for leading this. And Beth and Ron, I've had the pleasure of visiting with you guys in your multiple. I'll be seeing you again, Ron, soon.
Yep.
The rest of you guys, Ann and PID Mel, I think I'll be seeing you guys soon as well.
Yes, you will.
Wesley, you're the only one I'm not going to see. I know I'm seeing Daniel next year, but hopefully I'll get to see you somewhere as Wesley when I'm out there on the circuit as an ID. But thank you
Okay.
so much for everything, for doing all of this. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thank you
you all for
guys.
your
Thank you,
time, and
Daniel.
we'll see you on June 4th, noon Eastern via Zoom for our presentation on human resources. Look forward to it.
Before we close down,
you.
I'd like to ask, does somebody have a directory they can send us of all the people who are supposed to be on this association? So we can kind
Yes.
of know how to contact people and who's who?
Yep. I'd be glad to get that to you. Yep.
Okay. Don't have it, so I'd like to see that.
Yep. You
And
bet.
if there's anyone that you think would be appropriate and might want to be part of the group, we tried our best when we were bringing this together. I think we divided the list, Chris, Daniel, and I, and we tried to make sure we had coverage, or but things are always changing, and there might be someone that would be interested and appropriate for the group. So that goes for any of you all. Someone that you might think would be beneficial to have a part of this and benefit from it.
Yep.
Yep.
It is a growing list in Lion Mel. We're keeping it to eye vision care, whether it's eye banks or eye foundations at this time. And maybe later on we can do other things, but we just wanted to kind of keep it to our industry so we can help each other with the industry itself.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Take
all.
care,
Great job,
everyone.
Daniel.
Everybody.
Thanks,
Get some sleep,
everybody.
Daniel.
Bye, you guys.
See you in
Bye.
June.
Thank
Yep.
you.